through a number of sources. One, we're able to work and speak directly to consumers through a number of different research partners that we have. And also, we're very fortunate to be in the business where we can see a lot of the transactional behaviors that are happening in aggregate. And we use a lot of that information to help better understand the state of the economy, the state of economic impacts of certain things, including the pandemic of this year as a great example of that. Before we get into it, it wouldn't be a presentation without some sort of legal disclaimer. Really, the purpose of this is to claim that, of course, this is based on research, but doesn't necessarily inform our forward-looking statements of the performance of our business, of course. But just wanted to give a quick overview of the research we're doing. We're not going to talk about all the research. We specifically have identified a few specific slides that we're going to talk about. But to put in perspective, one of the things that we face, at least as a large company, is really making sure that we get access to Canada data, right? I'm sure many of you in the audience read all sorts of papers and white papers online from many different companies. And a lot of the times that research is often in the US only. And our perspective is that we should be providing research for Canada and giving Canadians perspectives. And here's a great example of that, where we did a 4,000 person panel, or rather survey with 2,000 US citizens and 2,000 Canadian citizens, where we could specifically understand how behaviors have changed post-COVID when it comes to e-commerce adoption or commerce adoption in general. What does the future hold when it comes to digital commerce and Canadians' perspectives there? And lastly, what kind of shifts are we seeing? We get really good coverage across Canada, and that coverage also includes age distribution between, moving from Gen Z all the way up to boomers, and also great regional coverage across all the major provinces and territories. And it's really important to continue to get a good perspective from both English-speaking Canada and French-speaking Canada. So when we put research together, it's really important that we have that coverage as well. And there was a lot that we covered, but today we're really going to talk specifically about Canadian consumers' preferences when it comes to going digital and e-com. If you're ever curious and you'd like to learn more, we do have research on, what is the future of stores look like when it comes to the importance of cleanliness, how has payments changed, and of course, what we're thinking about when it comes to post-COVID, when we look at things like revenge travel and what that means for certain SMBs that are in this space as well. So again, we're going to just go through about 6 slides excerpts from the research, just to give a little bit of a perspective of what's happening in Canada and perspectives around e-com and commerce in general. So when we ask Canadians to think about how their spending has changed, their behaviors have changed, a lot of the research came back, which was really around, no surprise, around the fact that there was a lot of panic buying that was happening during COVID at the outset. To put in perspective, this research was done at the end of the summer, and we are planning on probably doing a revisit of this research in early next year to see how perspectives have changed, because we've now, we're well into the second wave, and perspectives by Canadians may be very different than they were well into the summer when things were a little bit better from a numbers perspective. But we can see that, generally, panic buying became a really big thing, and there's been a bit of a normalization in that when we look at how people are spending today. We also know that people are thinking more smartly about their spending and thinking less indulgent and guilty, right? It's buying with purpose, right? I need to get these items. I need to do less treasure hunting. I need to get out. I need to get home as soon as I can, right? In the fears that exist. And no surprise that when we look at the research, people are shopping with more familiar merchants. They're shopping with fewer merchants because, again, they're going out with purpose. They're going home with purpose. If they're buying online, there's a little bit more flexibility, and they're shopping less often. And we see that with higher basket sizes, especially in the outset of COVID, less transactions, people buying more with fewer, and that's important to reflect. Now, with that, of course, that changes the game when we're thinking about the online environment, because in theory, you have the flexibility and the capability to shop at your leisure. If you're looking for specific items, that whole buying with purpose and leaving your home with purpose sort of subsides a bit. And I think that's important to reflect. When we looked at the research around what are people buying most and where was their shift in spend, nothing here should surprise you, right? Groceries, big increase in spend there, right? People are cooking at home more and more than ever before. Entertainment, looking at entertainment utility for home. Home improvement. This weekend, for example, I was looking at buying new shelving for my home because I've been buying so many groceries, I don't have enough space to store it all. So I'm building some temporary shelving so that I can actually store all of my additional items. Clothing, although there's been a hike up in clothing, what's interesting is that when we looked at research of what the top 5 revenge spending items would be post-COVID, clothing actually came in at number 2. And I think that's fair. I myself put on jeans for the first time only a couple weeks ago and surprised myself by the few extra pounds that I gained because those jeans felt a little tighter. Wearing sweatpants from the last few months is a great example of me not shopping enough and not buying nice clothing like I normally would in a normal circumstance. So although we're seeing a hike up in clothing, I think there's an excellent opportunity for more revenge spending in that space, especially as the second wave subsides. We're seeing a lot more in electronics. We're seeing a lot more spending in furniture and personal services, which I thought was pretty fascinating. But the lowest, of course, shift would be in travel, and there's no surprise there due to the situation when it comes to travel and the risks that are coming with traveling at this point in juncture. With this behavior, there's also been, and this I realize on a small screen may be a challenge to see, so forgive me, I'll try my best to describe. There's been a switch of significant items that have moved to very much online and have already been online, but we also see a switch of items that have not. So, you know, music, books, video games, movies, significant amount of that stuff, items are being purchased at home online. Whereas household goods and alcohol and pet supplies, these are still very much, at least based on Canadians' perceptions recently, very much an offline spending behavior, which is interesting. If you look at what has seen the most jump based on self-reported data of Canadians, personal care and beauty, very high up there, as well as medicinal items and furniture and home decor. Personal care and beauty for me is very fascinating because, for example, I find personally I'm not putting on my cologne every day because I don't have to go out anywhere. I'm just sitting at my desk. So I've, you know, but believe it or not, there's a significant amount of investment happening in the personal care and beauty space. And there's an excellent opportunity for small business in this category to leverage this wave. Same goes for opportunities around household goods. You know, if you have telehealth solutions, pet supplies, massive growth and explosion in online behavior and spending there as well.
Kobe,
sorry, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say a couple questions came in. Do you mind if I just?
Sure.
So one question had come in and said, where would beverage alcohol fall into these categories? Groceries, entertainment?
Yes, so alcohol actually was categorized and was requested as its own category. So significant buying happening. Of course, you know, this may not encapsulate bundling when you're looking at restaurants and things like that, but yes, alcohol was particularly asked on its own, as well as other products.
And then just the one other question in here, do these stats, Kobe, does online include calling or emailing a local store, then doing curbside pickup, or just like the standard buy online and have it delivered?
So when we asked the questions, we specifically asked about how their shopping habits have changed when it comes to online commerce. You know what, I'll have to come back to get how we categorize online commerce. So what I can do is when we get into the Q&A session, I can reach out to my team and get a little bit more detail around that. We also ask consumers, you know, what does it look like, you know, after, you know, as COVID continues or as COVID starts to subside, what will remain online versus potentially go back to decreasing into what we'll call physical spend. And interestingly enough, all in all, we're seeing a lot of sustainability. Now, again, the sustainability is tied to, you know, how much has it changed? And we don't know necessarily what the future holds. I think there will be definitely some categories that will see some movement back to physical. And we'll talk about why that's the case in a couple of slides. another thing we looked at was what are the leading tools that are being tested the most when it comes to services. And we know that on-demand and subscription services are very much a big focus. No surprise that food delivery services, grocery delivery services, remote services, and meal delivery services have seen a significant increase. Also because of the fact that many of these see significant bursts when there is no opportunity to go in store to buy these items, or go in restaurants as an example. So no surprise there. But there still is a population that is very comfortable with going, that they'd rather order items online and have them delivered. But there's also still those that really believe they want to go and pick it up at curbside. So that's why you've seen a lot of companies. I was speaking to a furniture merchant a few weeks ago who is in the marble business, and as you can imagine, when you're selling marble tables, it's very hard to deliver those items. So no surprise, they've invested heavily in curbside as a major focus for them, for obvious reasons, given the size of their items. We also asked Canadians, what were the reasons for shopping online? I think this is really important. What does it come down to? The number one for groceries and medicine primarily was safety and sanitation, while convenience bubbled up for every other category. Whereas inconvenience was a big category for household goods, furniture, electronics, personal care, and pet supplies. No surprise that, of course, regulation comes into play if you have no choice but to use those services vis-a-vis a online solution, because there's no other way that you're allowed to participate in those services. So we saw that bubble up as well, especially with telehealth and with groceries. And we continued with that question with some of the other categories as well, such as sports and fitness. We've set up a small, my fiance and I have set up a small fitness studio in our second bedroom. I wouldn't say it's up to par to what is out there in the physical, but we have a small number of weights and a mat, and that's our way of staying fit. And we bought that stuff online, as well as curbside pickup for some of those heavier items. But you could see across the board, including toys, big focus of buying online. And this is largely due to convenience, safety precautions, and regulations, of course. The last couple of slides I want to talk about, and then we'll move into the next stage, is although consumers can't deny time savings of shopping online, they do miss certain aspects of shopping physically, right? Window shopping is a great example of that, right? Being able to browse items, buying in bulk. It might be easier to buy in bulk apparently in person. Maybe you see a bunch of items of clothing and you just want to grab them all, versus maybe you feel a little bit more guilt when you're buying it online and you're clicking on all those different checkout buttons. But there's no question that there is still a yearning for doing certain behaviors when you're physically in a store, such as comparison shopping, making impulse purchases, and doing that treasure hunting that we talked about. And there's no question that people really do miss shopping in real life, right? Shopping in store. That doesn't mean that you should just focus on the hopes of things returning to where they may be. I think you need to be thinking about making sure you allow consumers choice. Consumers to buy online, consumers to discover online, and consumers to buy in store when it's okay to do so. So great research to see that, but no surprise that people do miss that social connection that exists. So we are seeing some startups emerging that are driving the ability to do exactly that, social buying together when you're online. Will that succeed? Not sure, but it's interesting to see some of those experimentations happening. So those are the slides that I wanted to cover today on the research side. I hope this gives you a good perspective of some of the things that we're seeing Canadians speak about. But I'll hand it off to Daryl to move on to the next topic.
So before you share your screen, Kobe, one
Yes.
question that's come up a lot: are we going to be able to share this deck after the fact?
I'm sure we could share an element of it, like some of the key takeaways, and then if anyone would like further details, we can look at it from a case-by-case perspective. No problem.
Not a problem. And then there was just some other general questions. So I think back on slide 13, Kobe, when you had all the categories, there was just some. So the first one was, does sports and fitness include like kids dance / fitness and recreation? Or maybe maybe that one. So sports and fitness, would that include like kids dance studios and stuff like that, you think?
I think we were kept it very general. So anything that would involve any form of fitness, I think that would fall under that. Yes.
Okay.
And we're seeing a lot of companies going online, not only with just leveraging Instagram from a marketing perspective. We've seen a lot of subscription service companies emerge in the SMB space to promote fitness from home.
And then what question was, what does the data show for book sales? So I believe that's the third line right there.
Yeah, so 26% increasing online, 53% maintaining online, and 21% decreasing spend online. So if we go back actually 2 slides back, books were 40% was already online with a switch of 36% incrementally switching online. So that's more than 3/4 of spending for books happening online, while 24% has been remaining in person according to Canadians' perspectives in this COVID-19 period.
And then I think it was a couple slides forward, Kobe. It just question is, how did you differentiate meal and food? So it might have been. So
meals was like meal prep. So
Okay.
like imagine a delivery of goods where you cook at home. Food delivery was hot foods, generally prepared foods that you just grab it and eat it right away.
Okay, hold on. Just trying to get through the slide specific ones. Yeah, so do you have any data on the restaurant industry, dine-in versus online ordering and pickup, et cetera? So is there anything in there that...
I can look into it. I know we did specifically ask about delivery. We focus more on the online piece, but let us take it back, Daryl, and let's see if we can report back on that once I speak to the research team.
No problem. How old is this data?
This was done at the end of July, so it's about 4 or 5 months. We're hoping to do another revisit of this in the first quarter of next year.
Okay. So just a couple other questions here, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. My chat has disappeared. Where would pottery fall under, Kobe?
That is a very good question. If I were to look, probably household goods. Furniture, home decor actually could be over both, depending on how consumers define it.
Can you please clarify the term revenge spending and how it applies to pandemic shopping?
Sure. So yeah, it's a bit of an abrasive word. It's this concept of like, where has there been pent up demand of spending, and where we think that spending will explode post COVID. We call it revenge spending. So the number one revenge spending category we've seen with Canadians is travel, which is not surprising. And the number 2, if memory serves me correctly, is clothing. And number 3 was a tie between auto as well as phones. So a lot of people may be staring at their phones this whole time because they're looking for content, maybe realizing they need to upgrade. So no surprise there.
And then, so there's 2. Did the book data reflect hard copies versus ebook? I'm going to suspect not.
It was just books in general, so okay. It wasn't bifurcated between ebooks and hard covers.
Okay. Any color to the personal care / beauty data points? Any disaggregation between products and services, barbers, for instance? So just looking at that kind of personal care and beauty line.
So I think personal care and beauty was more on the consumer packaged goods sides. I think we had something called personal care services that we talked about earlier, but I can look into that, no problem.
Okay. Did you consider art and handmade goods typically would have been from art shows? I think that's captured in probably the same thing as pottery.
Yeah, probably home decor and furniture, yeah.
Okay. So last question before we jump into it. There's a couple questions in here. Kobe, one around referencing any of the stats that you presented. Is that comfortable?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
MasterCard Canada, and we do it in partnership with a partner called the Harris Poll. So if you're curious about our research partner, we've been working with them for many years now, and they're a great partner.
Okay, very cool. So the last question is a bit of a loaded one, and it's interesting because it leads us into,